This is Kathy from Gadgets Top 321, and in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at Noodler's L. Lawrence. I'll be testing it in a variety of pins and nib sizes ranging from a Pilot Extra Fine to a 1.5 Stub Nib, and I've really enjoyed using it in this Quebeco Sport. I'm going to start with my Pilot Extra Fine stainless steel nib. And I kind of put off testing this ink. I've wanted to try this for quite a while. This is an interesting looking ink, but I have so many other interesting inks to try that I kept putting off trying this one. But it turns out I like this a lot more than I thought I was going to. All right, this feels a little bit scratchy in this extra fine nib. And it's a little hard to tell. My lighting is horrible. Fall, I don't know, has fall officially started yet, but fall hit and the sun stopped shining. It's just been cloudy every day. It's been enjoyable to spend time outside without it being sweltering hot, but it's not good for my videos. Now, this is a Pilot Pereira with a fine stainless steel nib, and this is really nice. Nice and pleasant to write with. It's hard to tell maybe from this video, but I picked this up because I thought it would be a nice substitute for black. You can tell here in this the Metropolitan stub that it's kind of it looks like an olive drab, and then when it's laid down a little bit heavier, it looks like used motor oil. And here's the vial of it. It does stick to the sides, and it just looks like used motor oil. Next, I've got my Sailor Le Cool with a medium fine nib, and I will say I do like the look of this ink better in broader nibs. As the nibs get broader, I like it better. And I really like it in this nib, this Sailor Le Cool. And it makes an interesting pair, this quartz color with that murky green. I like that pairing, and it feels nice to write with. I'm not always fond of this nib with every ink that I try, but I like it with this one. Okay, next is my favorite pen to use with this ink, my Quebeco Sport. This is an extra fine nib, but you'll see this is a German extra fine compared to these Japanese nibs that I've used so far. And I just like the line that this puts down. It just seems like just the right amount of ink. And all right. And this ink, it does, let's see if you can see here. It sticks to the nib kind of like motor oil sticks to the dipstick when you're checking your oil. That's what it really looks like. All right, and if you don't like it quite that dark, I've got a Quebeco Sport with a medium nib. I was surprised, there's not a lot of difference between the line width of these two. But this one, this Percao, you see a little more of the shading. And this is pretty smooth. It comes out, it's noticeably broader, but you do see a little more of the olive color. All right, next I've got my Pilot Metropolitan with a cursive medium nib. And sometimes this nib, it puts down such a small amount of ink. Let me write this first. That the ink looks more pale, but in this case, this ink looks good when it's a dry line is put down, and you just see the lighter olive color, and it's very smooth in this nib. All right, and finally I've got my 1.5 stub nib in my Jinhao X750. This is very satisfying to write with, in this stub nib. But I found that it doesn't look the best after it dries, and I'll talk about that in a little bit when I get to the Leuchtturm writing sample. But this is Tomoe River paper. I'm going to let this dry just a little bit while we look at the other paper samples. This is my writing sample on Rhodia, which I would call a mid-tier, mid-level quality fountain pen paper. Let's see. The stub almost wanted to bleed through a little bit. And this ink has just the tiniest bit of shading, which I like. I don't always like the shading to be overpowering, but when it puts down a lot of ink, it's a darker hunter green almost, and when it puts down a drier amount, like in that Metropolitan, it's more of an olive drab. And then with the stub nib, you see some shading there. It's just nice. I really like this ink in the medium nibs. And one of the things I like about it, it just seems like a great pocket pen ink. It's just, I don't know, rugged, and I like it in my pocket pens, and it's a good performing ink. Now, in my 20-pound copy paper, my poor quality paper, it was scratchy on the extra fine nib, not surprising. But in the Prera, as I was writing it, you would feel the ink spreading. You see how fast it soaks into the paper. It soaks into the paper instantly. So the Prera, even though it's not a wet writing pen, it just tended to spread too much for me. It wasn't that enjoyable. But the Sailor LeCool, I liked it. It's just enough drier that even though it looks the same, it was just more enjoyable to write with. Now, my Quebeco Sport was just a little too wet. It looks okay, but I just don't like that feeling when you're writing on paper and you just see it spreading out. Now, it looked okay. The Quebeco, though, is a little bit drier, and so since it soaks into the paper so quickly, the feed has trouble keeping up, so you can see it. You have really wet spots and really dry spots. So I didn't like the Quebeco on copy paper, but the Metropolitan was nice. The Metropolitan and the LeCool were two good options, and those are two pens that usually do pretty good on copy paper. That Sailor LeCool has the same nib that you find in the Sailor Compass that's available now. The only difference between the LeCool and the Compass is the Compass has rounded ends like a 1911, and the LeCool is shaped like the Pro Gear Slim. It's got the flat ends. In my Leuchtturm, L. Lawrence behaved kind of similarly to Rome Burning and Lexington Gray, which isn't surprising. I think all three of those are known for their water resistance, but Lexington Gray and Rome Burning and L. Lawrence, when I wrote in that really wide stub nib, it looks grainy, which, most of the inks that I try in this Leuchtturm notebook just really look good. They look nice and either velvety, or they'll show their sheen, or they'll have some shading, but those three inks are unusual in that they don't look their best in the Leuchtturm. And finally, the Tomoe River paper. It was just a nice experience in almost all the nibs. Like I said, I prefer the Sailor LeCool, starting with the Sailor LeCool up through the Metropolitan. Those were my favorites. The really fine nibs are just a little bit too fine. You don't get to see the ink's character. And in the stub nib on Tomoe River, I guess it was okay. It's just nothing that exciting. But in the medium nibs, I just really like it. And it's got that military rugged look to it. So I ended up liking this ink more than I thought I would, and I tried it in the Skyline Sport, but I'm also going to give it a try in my Lilliput. I hope it works well in the Lilliput. My Lilliput tends to be a little bit drier than the Skyline Sport. But if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.